How is hardness a physical property? To be considered a physical property that hardness does meet, some requirements should be satisfied. The main criterion to classify it as physical property is that hardness is not associated with a change in the chemical composition of matter. A chemical reaction is not necessary to observe and measure the hardness of material since it has no relationship with the chemical bonds present in the substance. Below is an explanation of what hardness means. Is hardness change a physical property? No doubt hardness has something to do with the physical nature and its changes associated with the matter. For a detailed explanation of this, firstly, let us consider what you mean by the hardness of a material. Hardness is the measure of the tendency of a material to resist some of the physical phenomena such as scratching, shaping, abrasion, indentation, etc. Physical property is identified or observed only when a physical change in the substance is associated with physical aspects. Some of the other facts regarding hardness. There are some vital facts that we need to know about hardness. We shall now discuss in a detailed manner about other aspects in which hardness is categorized. Hardness is a qualitative physical property of matter. Since hardness is a physical property of matter which can be observed by your senses similar to physical state, color, odor, etc., hardness can even be considered a qualitative property that is a feature of matter. Whereas the quantitative ones are the measures of values and counts. Hardness is an intrinsic physical property of matter. Hardness is independent of the quantity of the material substance present or the size of the sample. Hence we can specify hardness as an intrinsic property that can be determined by other factors. Some of the uses of knowing the hardness of a substance. To evaluate other properties of the material. The evaluation of properties of materials, namely strength, elasticity, and wear resistance, etc. Hardness differentiates metals from nonmetals. Generally, we can observe that metals are complex, but nonmetals are not. Thus, when you try to cut nonmetals such as sulfur and coal, they get easily cut, whereas metals cannot be cut easily by a knife. This differentiates metals and nonmetals based on hardness. Of course, a diamond can be considered an exception since it is the most complex material known, even though it is a nonmetal. Mention the primary differences between the chemical and physical property of matter. We can differentiate physical and chemical properties in many ways. The main differences between chemical and physical properties are mentioned below. One of the most important differences between physical and chemical properties of matter is that chemical properties are observed or measured when there is a chemical change in the substance. Whereas it is possible to measure the substance as physical properties with no change in the substance as chemical composition, there will be an observable change in the arrangement of matter, even though the structure of atoms and molecules remains as it is. Chemical physical one can observe and measure the chemical properties only when a chemical change occurs. There is no need for a chemical change to monitor the physical properties to show the property. Conduction of chemical reaction is necessary. A chemical reaction is not required. The chemical bonds of matter can influence its chemical property. Physical properties have no such connections with the chemical bonds. It can help predict the behavior of the substance when imposed on reactions. It is generally helpful in the identification and description of the substance. Some of the examples of chemical properties are toxicity, flammability, reactivity with other chemicals, chemical stability, enthalpy of formation, the heat of combustion, etc. A few examples of physical properties are appearance, texture, color, odor, melting point, boiling point, density, solubility, etc. Frequently asked questions, facts. What do you mean by the hardness of a material? Hardness can be considered as one of the most efficiently defined material properties. The hardness can be depicted as the ability of that material to impose resistance to the following phenomenons: scratching, abrasion, indentation, shaping, deformation of plastic. Does the hardness of the material is affected by its color? Color does not influence the hardness of a material. Even though both hardness and color are physical properties, they are independent of each other, which can be explained by a simple example mentioned below. The color of a woodblock does not affect its hardness since it is an aesthetic property, whereas hardness is physical. Similarly, a rock's color has nothing to do with its hardness. Hardness is considered physical property, and color is not. Mention different types of hardness. The hardness property is mainly based on its plasticity and flexibility. The other factors that affect hardness are strain, strength, the toughness of the object, the viscosity of the material, etc. There are various kinds of hardness, some of them are given below. Scratch hardness, indentation hardness, rebound hardness. How can we classify the substances we see around? Some precise characteristics and properties are observed in the substances around us, which help classify and identify them. One can differentiate the various substances considering their chemical and physical characteristics. In studying the materials, these aspects are of prime importance. Is hardness property of chemical or physical aspect of matter? Hardness is one of the essential and prominent characteristics of matter to be considered. Since hardness is related to a physical phenomenon associated with matter, it is not a chemical property but a physical one. Some of the other physical properties of a material are, namely, how can the hardness of material be measured using a Mohs scale? Mohs scale is a crucial instrument specially used to measure the hardness of any material. Hardness is measured against the scale. The procedure to measure the hardness is first to find the hardest material, then, one should check the given material whose hardness has to be found. One can test this by scratching it, or it is done by using the softest material that can straightforwardly scratch the material. How the particle size and hardness can be related? The hardness and particle size of the material have a Hall-Petch relationship. The dependence of hardness on particle size is experimentally found to be as follows: as we go on decreasing the particle size, the hardness of the material increases. This is because materials tend to absorb more significant amounts of energy due to elastic and plastic deformations. This explains why brittle materials are more likely to have less toughness. Please visit our website lambdageeks.com for more articles on technology, engineering, mathematics, and various other domains. Scientific calculator and many more other tools.